Okay, so, like, the gender pay gap, right? It's one of those things, it's been around forever. It feels like we always hear that same stat, women making 84 cents for every dollar a man makes. And you think by now things would be different? Like, how is this still a thing?
Yeah, it's pretty mind-boggling when you think about it.
So that's what we're diving into today, figuring out why this gap exists and why it just won't quit. We're going deep on this one, folks. With LeanIn.org's article, Women Are Paid Less Than Men, and the Gap is Closing Too Slowly. And whether you're, a total boss in your field or just starting your journey, this deep dive is for you because understanding this stuff, it matters.
It really does. And this LeanIn.org article, they don't hold back. They get right to the heart of the matter. They point out that even that 84 cents figure, it doesn't tell the whole story.
Oh, there's more. Okay, so what are we missing?
Well, that number, it only looks at full-time workers.
Right.
When you factor in all women who are working, those working part-time or maybe only part of the year, that number drops. It plummets to 78 cents on the dollar.
Whoa, seriously, that's a huge difference.
Yeah.
It's like not cool. And I bet this isn't the same for all women, right? Like different groups probably experience this even more intensely.
Exactly. The pay gap, it doesn't discriminate, but it definitely hits certain groups harder. We're talking about women of color, for instance. They face even wider disparities. For a lot of them, it's not even 84 cents on the dollar.
Yeah, this is where it gets even more disheartening. It's 2024, for crying out loud. It's like we're still dealing with this.
It's true. And the numbers are stark. Black women, for example, earn just 67 cents for every dollar a white man earns, and it's even lower for Native American women, only 61 cents.
It's just,
Yeah.
it's wrong. You'd think with more education, things would get better, like, oh, I'll just go get another degree. But this article, it suggests that's not the magic solution.
It would be nice if it were that simple, wouldn't it? But sadly, education, while incredibly important, it's not the great equalizer we might hope for.
So you're telling me that even with the same degrees, women are still getting paid less. What's the deal with that?
Well, it comes down to a bunch of factors, but one of the big ones that researchers have been looking at is this thing called the devaluation of women's work. Basically, research indicates that as more women enter a field, the pay in that field tends to go down.
Hold on, are you serious? So it's like the more women there are, the less the work is valued? That's messed up.
It really is. And we see this happening in professions that have traditionally been dominated by women, like think about teachers, nurses, social workers, all these essential roles.
It's like some kind of messed up algorithm. Oh, more women are doing this. Time to pay everyone less.
It's way more complex than that, of course, but you're hitting on something really important here. It's not just about individual women, not being assertive enough or choosing lower paying jobs. There's a systemic undervaluing of work that's often done by women.
Okay, that is a total game changer. You always hear that thing about women needing to be better negotiators, but this article, it's like, hold up a sec.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of research on this since 2015 showing that women are actually asking for raises and promotions at rates comparable to men. But here's the catch. Those requests, they often don't get met with the same level of approval.
So even when women are leaning in, advocating for themselves, there are still these invisible barriers in place. Man, that is just, it makes you wonder about the ripple effects of all this, right? It can't just be about individual paychecks.
You're absolutely right. It goes way beyond that. This impacts families, kids, the whole economy. We're talking about a major ripple effect.
Okay, yeah, so break that down for me, because I can see how this would impact families, especially with so many women being the primary breadwinners these days.
Exactly. If you think about it, when moms, who are often the ones holding it down at home, are getting paid less, it directly affects their family's budget, their ability to just make ends meet, let alone save or plan for the future. And then there's the bigger picture, the economy as a whole. Closing this gap, it wouldn't just be the right thing to do, it would be a huge economic win for everyone.
Okay, I'm listening. Tell me more about how this ties into the economy. What kind of impact are we talking about here?
Well, studies have shown that if we were to close the gender pay gap, we could potentially see a significant reduction in poverty rates, maybe even cut it in half, and potentially inject billions, if not trillions of dollars back into the U.S. economy. It's massive.
Oh, now that's what I'm talking about. So we're not just
Yeah.
talking about fairness here, although that's obviously huge. We're talking about a massive economic opportunity that we're missing out on.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer, right? And that 84 cents on the dollar number we were talking about? Think of that as just one piece of a much bigger picture.
Okay, I like where you're going with this. What do you mean one piece?
Well, it's just a snapshot in time, right? It tells us what's happening right now on average. But to really get it, we've got to zoom out and look at the long game, like lifetime earnings.
Right, right. Because it's not just about this year or next year. It's about decades of earning potential. Do we know how much money we're talking about over a lifetime?
We do, and the numbers are, well, they're pretty alarming. The National Women's Law Center crunched the numbers, and they found that because of the pay gap, the average woman loses out on hundreds of thousands of dollars over her career, sometimes even more than $1 million.
$1 million.
Yeah.
You're kidding. See, this is what I'm talking about. This is huge. It's not just about having enough to make rent or buy groceries. It's about retirement, owning a home, being able to support yourself and your family long term.
Absolutely. And here's another layer to this whole thing, because it's not just about income, right? It's also about wealth, those assets and resources that can help you build a secure future.
Okay, so how does wealth play into all of this?
Well, the LeanIn.org article doesn't delve too deep into this aspect, but I think it's super relevant here. There's this Goldman Sachs report from a few years back, 2021, I think, and it found that single white women, they own about 92 cents in wealth for every dollar owned by single men.
Okay, so there's a gap there, but it's not as drastic as the pay gap.
Right. But here's where it gets really wild for single Black women. That number plummets to just 8 cents on the dollar compared to white men.
8 cents.
Mhm.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
That's like almost nothing. It's like the system is actively working against them. It's heartbreaking. I mean, we talk about these statistics, but it's easy to forget that these are real people's lives.
Absolutely. These aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They represent real families, real dreams that are being impacted every single day. And, while we've been focusing on the challenges here and the disparities, I think it's important to remember that closing this gap, it's not just the right thing to do morally, it also makes good economic sense for everyone.
Right. Like a rising tide lifts all boats, right? When women succeed, everyone benefits.
100%. And there's research to back this up. The Institute for Women's Policy Research did a study on this, and they found that if we were to close the gender pay gap, we could potentially reduce the poverty rate in the U.S. by half. And on top of that, it would pump over $500 billion into the U.S. economy.
Half the poverty rate. $500 billion. Those are some serious numbers. See, this is what I'm talking about. This isn't just a women's issue, it's an everyone issue.
100%.
And it's so frustrating because you still hear those old arguments about women choosing lower paying jobs or not being assertive enough and asking for raises. But all the research we've been talking about today, it totally debunks those myths.
It really does. It's time to retire those tired old tropes. Women are ambitious, they're asking for what they deserve, and they're more than capable of achieving great things when they're given a fair shot. So the question is, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, it feels like such a huge, overwhelming issue. Where do we even begin?
You're right, it's a big challenge, but it's not insurmountable. And the first step is simply awareness, understanding the problem, which is exactly what we're trying to do here today.
Knowledge is power.
Exactly. Beyond that, we need to start pushing for real systemic change. Things like pay transparency laws, affordable childcare options, stronger enforcement of existing equal pay laws. These are all crucial pieces of the puzzle.
It's about changing the system, not just asking women to work harder within a system that's already rigged against them.
Exactly. And it's on all of us to challenge those outdated societal norms and expectations that got us here in the first place.
Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about women, right? This is about creating a more just and equitable world for everyone. This has been like eye-opening, really. But, I'm thinking about all the women listening who are like right there in it, trying to build their careers right now. It can feel kind of overwhelming, right? Like, where do you even start? Does LeanIn.org offer any advice for those women?
They do, and it's good stuff, really practical. They emphasize that, women can't just fix this on their own. It's a systemic issue. But there are things women can do, strategies to navigate this crazy system. And one thing they highlight is mentorship and sponsorship.
Okay, yeah, those are always hot topics. How do they suggest finding those mentors and sponsors, and what's the best way to approach those relationships?
Well, finding a mentor, it's like finding a really awesome coach, someone who can offer guidance, be a sounding board, share their experiences. A sponsor's a little different. It's more like having someone in your corner who's, a little higher up the ladder, someone who can really open doors, advocate for you when it matters most.
So it's like having a cheering squad and a power player all in one, right? Because we can't just wish away those systemic barriers overnight, right? It's got to be a multi-pronged approach.
Exactly. And one thing we haven't touched on much is the role of men in all of this. Because let's be real, We need everyone on board to make real change happen, right?
100%. It's not just a women's issue. It's an everyone issue.
For sure. And LeanIn.org, they talk about this, how men can be incredible allies in this fight by, challenging those outdated norms in their own workplaces, advocating for their female colleagues, making sure women are getting those opportunities.
Love it. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you really want our listeners to take away from this conversation? Because we've covered a ton.
I think the biggest takeaway is that the gender pay gap, it's not just about women, choosing different careers or not negotiating well enough. It's so much bigger than that. It's like this deeply ingrained thing in our society, this system that's been around for way too long. But the good news is we can change it. It starts with awareness, with understanding the problem, and then it's about taking action, even if it's just small steps.
Yes, small steps lead to big change, right? It's about all of us using our voices, our choices, to make a difference.
Exactly.
This has been such an important conversation. Big thanks to our expert for dropping so much knowledge on us today. And to all our listeners, we're going to link to that LeanIn.org article in our show notes so you can check it out for yourself. It's called Women Are Paid Less Than Men, and the gap is closing too slowly. Let's keep this conversation going, folks. Challenge those old school ideas, and let's work together to close that gap once and for all. Thanks for tuning into this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.